So, I think you all know what I mean by globalization, don't you? This is the idea that we all live in a global village. With instant communications, we can share ideas and consume cultural artifacts from countries all over the world just by going into the internet and all dream up, basically. The world is shrinking. In terms of speeds, it is accelerating, but in terms of distance, it's shrinking. What do I mean by detraditionalization? I mean the disappearance, or the erosion, for the better word to use, the erosion of traditional cultures, of conventional ways of doing things, of conventional moralities. More and more young people around the world are rejecting the culture they grow up in, and it's probably a little bit cruel. But some, imitating a Hollywood model of society, rather than the one which they inherit from their local, tradition background. Okay. Ever try to get a baby to smile? It can seem close to impossible, and then suddenly there it is, that elusive, seemingly joyous grin. Well, it turns out those smiles aren't spontaneous, they're strategic. Researchers have found that when babies smile, it's for a reason. They want whoever they're interacting with, typically a parent, to smile back. And they time it just so, a smile here and a smile there. The researchers call it sophisticated timing. The study is in the journal PLOS 1. The researchers enlisted real mothers and infants and quantified their interactions, which fell into 4 categories. 1. Babies wanted to maximize the amount of time smiling at their mothers. 2. They wanted to maximize the time the mothers smiled at them. 3. They wanted to experience simultaneous smiling, and 4. No smiling at all. By studying when smiles happened and what the subsequent effect was, the investigators were able to figure out that for mothers the goal 70% of the time was to be smiling simultaneously, while for babies 80% of the time they just wanted their mother smiling at them. So, mothers want the interaction, while babies just want to be smiled at, so your baby may not be able to feed itself, talk or even turn over yet. But when it comes to smiles, babies seem to know exactly what they're up to. So faults are breaks in the Earth crust. We can identify them because of the discontinuity in the structure within the Earth crust across fault. An earthquake occur on these faults, so very processes by which these faults moves to a large extent is due to earthquakes. So we have a fault plane and the earthquake is so focus on this fault plane and the earthquake starts at the particular point on the fault plane and we call that the focus of the earthquake. The rock prorogate out from that point on the rupture plane to cover the entire fault plane. The rupture is in that particular earthquake. We talked about the epicenter of the earthquake a lot. The epicenter is just the surface projection of the focus of the earthquake. So if you wanted to looking at map view where the earthquake was located, we would be able to look that into the earth. We would see the focus down some depth in the earth or the epicenter, just a point vertically above that focus at the surface of the earth. So this is the focus between the faults and the earthquakes. The aperture of a telescope is several times larger than the aperture of the human eye so that the objects cannot be normally seen by unaided eye can be seen. Light gathering power of a telescope is proportional to the area of its aperture and hence depends on the square of the radius of the mirror. Therefore, a 20 cm diameter telescope collects 4 times more photons than a 10 cm diameter telescope. A telescope can be equipped to record light over a long period of time, by using photographic, film or electronic detectors such as photometers or CCD detectors while the eye has no capability to store light. A long-exposure photograph taken through a telescope reveals objects too faint to be seen with the eye. Even by looking through the same telescope, A third major advantage of large telescopes is that they have superior resolution, the ability to discern fine detail. Small resolution is good. The resolution is directly proportional to the wavelength being observed and inversely proportional to the diameter of the telescope. And I am the professor of children's literature at Newcastle University, and I want to write a very short introduction to children's literature because although here in Britain one of the longest and most distinguished traditions of creating books for children, perhaps the longest and most distinguished in the world, we often take them for granted and we don't pay enough attention to what a remarkable cultural resource they are for adults and kind of cultural work they do for children, and the way that they have served writers and illustrators as a cultural space for creativity, subversion, and opportunities to experiment with new ideas. So what kind of cultural work the children's books do? Well, at the level of individual child, this is one of the places where children learn the vocabularies, get the vicarious experiences, and see the images of the world that help them think about how the world works and where they fit into it. Because children's books are first places that children encounter these things, they are often very direct, as a source of information about what a particular period thinks, including what it thinks a child is, what a child needs to know, what childhood looks like. Sometimes when we are looking at children's books from the past, it's very important to notice these kinds of children who aren't there, for instance. So that is one of the things that we have in children's books.